He's like talking about a lot of things.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأنذر عشيرتك الأقربين واخفض جناحك لمن اتبعك من المؤمنين فإن عصوك فقل إني بريء مما تعملون وتوكل على العزيز الرحيم الذي يراك حين تقوم وتقلبك في الساجدين إنه هو السميع العليم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. In the previous session, we left off in the middle of our discussion about ayah number 214. Therefore, I recited from ayah 214 till 220 a very brief translation of these ayat. Warn your nearest kinfolk and lower your wing tenderly over the believers who follow you. If they disobey you, say, I bear no responsibility for your actions. I bear no responsibility for your actions. Put your trust in the Almighty, the Merciful, who sees you when you stand up for prayer and sees your movements amongst the worshippers. He is the all-hearing, the all-knowing. So we left off in the middle of the conversation about ayah number 214. In ayah number 214, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, He commands the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. To summarize some of the points that we had touched upon in the previous discussion, first and foremost was the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam such an enormous mission, such an enormous responsibility, where he had to preach and take this message to all of humanity. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oftentimes we can, kind of think about this and reflect upon this. When you have a monumentous task in front of you, sometimes one of the very difficult things that can be to figure out is, where do you start? How do you begin? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points the Prophet ﷺ in that direction. وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. That warn the closest of your tribes people. So the people that are more directly related to you. وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. And so we talked a little bit about the fact that the wisdom therein and the sunnah, or rather the methodology that the Prophet ﷺ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is laying out for the Prophet ﷺ, and thereby this also becomes a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the prophetic tradition, that regardless of what the reception may be like, and we saw that with some of the people that were the closest to the Prophet ﷺ, the response was positive. Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, Ali bin Abi Talib, Zayd bin Haritha, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in, and many, many others who were very close to the Prophet ﷺ. So there was a positive response. But at the same time, there was a negative response, which we'll talk about in just a moment, amongst the likes of Abu Lahab and some others. But nevertheless, this becomes confirmed. This is confirmed now, that the methodology that God has laid out and the prophetic tradition in regards to this is, of course, in compliance with that divine instruction. And that is the fact that whenever we are trying to be a force of good in the world, that job and that mission begins with the people that are closest to us. And I tried to, a little bit more, I tried to explain that in a bit more of a restrained fashion. I think I generally kind of failed in that regard. But nevertheless, I tried to communicate that as calmly as I could. And the simple fact that we have to, and that's one of the places where it can be the most challenging and it can be the most difficult. Because with people that are further away from you, it's very easy to have two completely different modes of operation. It's very easy. You have your own private self and how you conduct yourself and how you carry yourself and how you speak to people, how you treat people. And then you're able to perform in public. And you're able to put on a particular portrayal when you interact with people that are further from you. But to actually, quote unquote, again, to simplify the rhetoric, to be a genuinely good person with the people that are closest to you, immediately around you, the people that see you every day. They see you in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. Your co-workers, your neighbors, your family members. There's people that are immediately right there. That's a lot more difficult. It's both more difficult and at the same time it's easy. What I mean by that is it's difficult that it's going to actually take some reformation. It's going to require you to actually reform yourself, to cleanse your heart, to become a better person. Because you won't be able to keep up that type of act at home or even at work day in and day out. But it's also easy in the sense of it's in line with our fitrah, it's in line with our nature. It requires you to just become very honest with yourself. And it requires you to become very honest with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And honesty at the end of the day, it's something, that type of honesty is something that in the short term is actually a bit painful. It's like taking the treatment that will make you better. And that, in the immediately when you implement it, in the beginning, it's obviously a lot more challenging and a lot more difficult. But in the long term, it creates a lot of comfort and ease and consistency within one's life. And that's why as-sidqu yunji. Right? And sidq is, yes, we translate it as honesty, but it also means like just honesty at so many different levels. Being honest with yourself, being honest with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And that's a synthesis of both the internal and the external, the private and the public. So this is وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. This is something very profound that we take from this particular lesson of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, to further the conversation on this, we're going to talk a little bit about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's experiences therein, because we learn a lot from that. So when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ implementing, by the way, let me go ahead and just address one issue that is brought up by the scholars of Ulum al-Quran. It's a bit of an interesting, question that is presented. Imam al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala, he talks about this, where he says that there's one very fascinating question, and that is the fact that we talked about how Surah Shu'ara was revealed later in the Meccan period. We talked about how it was the 47th surah in terms of its revelation. It's 26th, but in terms of the sequence of revelation, it was the 47th surah. So it comes quite a bit later. But وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ is an instruction given to the Prophet ﷺ in the beginning of his mission. So now how do you reconcile that apparent, that contradiction or that just how do you answer that question? And so there are two explanations to this. Number one is, we find it very frequently within the Quran that when the bulk of a surah, there are many surahs that we say they are Medinan surahs, they were revealed in Medina. But a verse or two or three of those surahs might have been revealed in the Meccan period. But the surah is still called a Medinan period, a Medinan surah. Why is that? Because there's 150 ayat. And if 3 of them were revealed in Makkah and 147 were revealed in Medina, لِلْأَكْثَرِ حُكْمُ الْكُلِّ, then you just refer to it as a Medinan surah, because it's overwhelmingly Medinan. Alright, Madani. So that's one answer to the question, that it's very plausible that these couple of ayat here, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, like maybe even just this one singular ayah, he says, maybe this was revealed earlier on and then the rest of the surah came down later. And that's very easily reconcilable. The second thing, and this is a very fascinating issue in Ulum al-Quran, in the study of the Quran, and that is the fact that there are some ayat of the Quran that have multiple moments of revelation. They have multiple circumstances, situations of revelation, asbab al-nuzul. And what that means is, sometimes a verse was revealed earlier on, but then later on, because its relevance was present once again, It was significant to the conversation again. It was revealed the second time. But it was informed to the Prophet ﷺ, Jibreel ﷺ reminding him of it, or it being revealed to him again. But still it would be told to him that this is the same exact verse that was revealed earlier. From that same place. It's just being reiterated to you because it's so relevant at this moment. Okay, and so that's also a very plausible explanation that this verse was revealed earlier in the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, telling him, how to proceed and how to begin his efforts, and then later on it was revealed with the rest of the surah towards the end of the Meccan period. So putting that conversation aside, the next thing that I wanted to talk about here is that there's also the issue of leading by example. And there's the issue of integrity here as well. Allow me to explain exactly what that means. What that means is the fact that, and this is, even though this criticism when made against someone is not appropriate because you're not sure of what that person has done or not done, or you're not sure what they've tried or haven't tried, we just don't know. Sahibul bayti adra bima fihi. Someone who lives inside of a home knows best what goes on within that home. Right? We stand outside and we yell all types of things at the inhabitants of the home, but we don't know what's going on in there. Right? So a criticism that is often made is that, let me give the example. If I'm the imam of the masjid, and I kind of talk about the fact that, in the prayer hall, we should not make too much noise within the prayer hall. I say that. And then what happens is that someone sees, my brother or my son sitting in the back of the masjid and making noise and laughing and joking and, causing a bit of a ruckus. What's the immediate thought that passes through everyone's head? What's the immediate thought that occurs to everyone? Tell everybody to be quiet. Can't tell your own kid to be quiet. You tell everybody not to make no noise, and then your own brother sitting back there making noise. Right? That's the immediate thought that occurs. And that's why I said that criticism is not fair to be made, because nobody can really speak to exactly what the situation there is and is not. Right? However, at the same time though, the person themselves giving the particular advice does themselves. So there's always this two-way street. This is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ told a host that a reflection of your faith is how well you treat your guest. A reflection of your faith is how well you treat your guest. But the Prophet ﷺ told the guest, do not be a burden on your host. فَإِذَا طَعِمْتُمْ فَانْتَشِرُوا وَلَا مُسْتَأْنِسِينَ لِحَدِيثٍ. Right? لَا تَدْخُلُوا بُيُوتَ نَبِيٍّ لَا يُؤْذَنَ لَكُمْ. Don't be a burden on your host. Don't just barge right in. Somebody invited you, so you just walk right in. Hey, I'm here. No, easy there. Knock on the door. Right? The Prophet ﷺ even taught us to the point where one time the Prophet ﷺ asked, who's there? And he said, Ana. He said, Man Ana? Who's this Ana? I don't know a guy named Ana. You ain't got a name? Right? So don't be a burden on your host. Don't barge right in. Don't walk around. The Prophet ﷺ talked about not peering into someone's home unless you've been invited in. And then the Quran also goes as far as saying that when you do enter into someone's house as their guest, the moment that the invitation basically has concluded, they invited you for dinner, okay, they invited you to stay for a day, whatever the case may be, when that's concluded, then move right along and don't linger. Don't linger. So he's telling the host to be very gracious. He's telling the guest to be very cautious. What do you have in the middle? What does that create? That creates a perfect environment. Everyone's being nice to each other. No one's trying to be a burden on the other. No one's trying to hurt anyone's feelings. Right? That's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So, same here. When you have someone giving advice to the community, and then maybe you see something that in your mind kind of, it occurs as an inconsistency. I'm telling everybody, don't make noise in the musalla. And then my own son is making noise in the back. Then in that situation, the etiquette for the congregants is to not pass judgment on me. That, look at that. Another hypocritical preacher. What a surprise. Right? The etiquette for the congregant is to not go there. But the etiquette for the preacher in that situation, the nasih, the one giving the advice, is to also themselves reflect on the fact that have I actually implemented it in my life at least, or at least attempted to implement it in my life before I go up there and start pounding the minbar and start telling everybody what to do? Have I at least tried it? Have I told my children? Have I told my son, hey, listen, I need you to keep it down in the khutbah, okay? Don't be sitting back there playing video games, talking with your friends. Like, you need to keep it down. You need to keep it together, okay? Otherwise, the lobby of the masjid is there for a reason. You've got to talk to somebody so badly, you step out into the lobby, not in the middle of the khutbah. Have I at least done that? I have to think about that. So I need to think about whether I've actually implemented it or not, or at least attempted to. And the congregant needs to also be mindful of the fact that I just don't know what's been done, what hasn't been done, what's been said, what hasn't been said, what the situation is or what it is not. And therefore I don't need to be passing any judgment here. And that's what creates a good interaction, a good relationship there. Okay? So, something very important here that this also teaches us, that if I'm going out there preaching to the rest of the world, there is the question of the fact that if there's people immediately around me who are not on board with this message, have I at least tried to deliver this message to them or not? And that is also another problem being solved here by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have to start with your own people first. You have to start with them first. And this is something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam demonstrated at another very powerful seminal moment when the Prophet ﷺ comes to Makkah for Hajjatul Wida, the farewell pilgrimage, when the Prophet ﷺ performed the Hajj. And the Prophet ﷺ gave the sermon, the very famous sermon of Hajjatul Wida. When he made certain proclamations in that sermon, one of the very heavy proclamations and decrees that were issued in that sermon was, وَإِنَّ كُلُّ رِبًا فِي الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ مَوْضُوعٌ تَحْتَ قَدَمَيَّ هَاتَيْنِ. The Prophet ﷺ said, every usurious transaction is hereby from today amended. The usury is being negated from that transaction. Because before Islam, usury unfortunately was a very tragic part of their culture. Very exploitive usury, where the wealthy and the rich would prey on the needs of the destitute, the weak, the poor. And so it was egregious. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, from here on out, all the previous transactions, so even if I had lent him money before Islam in Mecca, I had given him a loan, and there was usury on that loan, and it was written down, we got witnesses, everything. And it was before Islam. The Prophet ﷺ was saying that Ra'sul Mal, the $100 that I loaned him, he still owes me that $100. But that usury that I had added on top of that, that is hereby negated. That was very heavy. Because we're talking about tons of money now was basically up in the air. Alright? And so the Prophet ﷺ, just by that proclamation, he just amended like huge contracts that had existed for 20 years. But somebody could have come and said, well, that's easy for you to say. How many people here owe you money? How many people here owe you money? And so that's easy for you to say. I got like 100 people who owe me money from before Islam, and now that you changed the whole contract, I had lent them the money based on that. If I knew that usury wasn't allowed, I probably wouldn't have lent them the amount of money I did. But now all of a sudden, I'm facing all these losses. So somebody could have come and said that, easy for you to say. And so what did the Prophet ﷺ say next? He said, وَأَوَّلُ مَا أَضَعَهُ رِبَ الْعَبَّاسِ. The Prophet ﷺ said, I never engaged in usury, giving it or taking it, even before Islam. So I can't lead by example, quote unquote. I can't lead by example in this situation. But what I can do is, as close as possible to me, where it's, maybe not me feeling the pinch of it, but somebody very close to me feeling the pinch of it. Alright? And that is my uncle Abbas, because Abbas was very wealthy. Abbas was very wealthy before Islam. And even after Islam. But particularly before Islam, he was very wealthy. And so he said, my uncle Abbas, a ton of you owe him money. And there's usury on those contracts. And that's the very first usury that I'm negating. The interest that I'm negating. So anybody who owes Abbas money, you just got to return back the exact amount of money that he lent you. None of the interest you have to pay him now. And so that was the Prophet ﷺ leading by example. And this is that same demonstration of the fact that I'm not coming and giving you a message that I haven't first tried to give to my own people. And so that's that leading by example that this also achieves and accomplishes. And also just the fact, there's a very powerful story that is mentioned about Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. There's actually many stories to this particular effect. But a couple of stories in particular that I'll share here that talks about Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is a demonstration of the fact that, once again, one has to be concerned, particularly when one is going to be in a position of, leadership. Somebody is going to be in a position of, leading others, guiding others, giving others advice and counsel and nasiha. Then that person just has to be very cognizant of the fact that they have to try to achieve an environment immediately around them that is synchronized with that particular message. Their own immediate surroundings cannot seem contradictory to the message that they are giving to other people. And one particular story about Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu that is mentioned that is very, very fascinating is that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, one of the big issues that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about a lot of times was the fact that there needs to be equity, there needs to be equality, there needs to be fairness. The abuse of power was one of the biggest things the Prophet ﷺ worked against. So there's this very fascinating story that's mentioned, is that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he came to give khutbah once. It's mentioned by Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah ta'ala in Sifatul Safwa, that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu came to give khutbah one time, and he was on the minbar, Friday khutbah, and he was saying, Ayyuhan nas isma'u wa ati'u. Oh people, listen and obey. A Bedouin, he stood up and he said, La sam'a laka wa la ta'a. La sam'a laka wa la ta'a. He said, no, we will not listen to you and we will not obey you. انظر إلى هذه الجرأة على من؟ على منبر على عمر وهو على المنبر. And so the narrator says that look at the audacity of this individual. Who is he standing up to? He's standing up to Umar when he's a Khalifa, when he's on the minbar. So Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, Walima. Why? Why do you object to listening and obeying? He says, لِأَنَّ ثِيَابَكَ أَطْوَلُ مِنْ ثِيَابِنَا. He says, because your clothes, your qamis, your shirt, is longer than our shirt. What does that mean? So the narrator explains. He says, وَكَانَ الْقُمَّاشُ يُوَزَّعُ بَيْنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ بِالتَّسَاوِي. That the cloth that Umar radiallahu ta'ala was wearing, the qamis he was wearing, was made from a cloth that had basically come through some type of spoils of war. And what had been done with that cloth was that it was cut up into equal amounts. Alright? Like 2 yards or 3 yards or whatever. It was cut into these equal amounts and distributed equally amongst the community. Everyone got 3 yards of that cloth. Everyone. لا فرق بين طويل وقصير. And there was no consideration about, well, I'm tall and he's short, or not, I'm short and he's tall. None of that. It was just cut up into 3 meters each and 3 yards, and it was just distributed far and wide to everybody in the community. Okay? فقال عمر رضي الله تعالى. So, but now he's seeing that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu's shirt, everybody who made shirts out of it, maybe the shirt came down to their knees, and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu's shirt is coming down a little bit lower. And so he sees that, and he says, no, you have a longer shirt made out of that same material. This is not fair. This shows a lack of integrity on your part. And so I can't let you proceed. Explain yourself. Explain yourself. And so Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says to his son Abdullah bin Umar, who's sitting there in the masjid, Friday, it's a khutbah, sitting there, he says, "Qum ya Abdullah, lituri an-nas." He says that, can you stand up and show everybody? فَقَامَ عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. So Abdullah bin Umar, the son of Umar bin al-Khattab, he stands up, and his shirt is shorter than everyone else's. His shirt is only coming to like his thigh. It's not going down to his knee. It's shorter. It's like a yard short. So he stands up and shows everyone, and he says, "Inna abi rajulun tiwalun." He says, my father is a very tall man. Mubalaghatan fitul. Right? Very, very tall. وَثَوْبُهُ فِي الْمُسْلِمِينَ لَمْ يَكْفِهِ. When he also got the 3 yards that everyone got, when they made the shirt, it didn't even like reach his waist. It wouldn't have even reached his waist. It wouldn't have been appropriate. He just wouldn't have been able to wear it. And Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma was short. He was shorter than average. So he said, because of being shorter than average, فَأَعْطَيْتُهُ ثَوْبِي فَوَصَلَهُ بِثَوْبِهِ. So what I did was I cut a yard off of my garment and we sewed it onto the bottom of his garment, thereby making his garment somewhat more appropriate. And mine got a little bit shorter, but I'm shorter anyway, so it still suffices me. وَهَذَا آنِذٍ بِمُرَقَّعَتِي بَيْنَكُمْ. And he says that, so what you're seeing here is just, I gave a part of my shirt to my father. عِنْدَهَا قَالَ الْأَعْرَابِي إِذًا نَسْمَعُ وَنُطِيعُ. Then the A'rabi, the same Bedouin who objected, he says, okay, that's fine, you can continue now. SubhanAllah. Right? That's the type of integrity that was demanded by these people. Of the people who are going to be. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, another issue the Prophet ﷺ spoke about very sternly was impropriety and violating, the amana of the public fund. The amana of the public fund. Like not personally utilizing the public fund. That was something else the Prophet ﷺ placed a lot of emphasis on. Khiyana fil amana. So Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he comes home one time and his wife is measuring musk and kind of cutting it into blocks and measuring it and things like that. And he says, what are you doing? Where did this come from? What are you doing? And she says, somebody donated all this musk. It's kind of like almost like in block form, like blocks of soap. And so she said, I'm kind of cutting it up into pieces. I'm measuring it, labeling it. I'm just doing it before we store it in the Baytul Mal. So I just thought I would help out. He said, why did you do this? You're the wife of Amirul Mu'mineen. Why did you do this? She said, what do you mean? Why did I do what? Why did I help? And he says, did some of the musk, since you're handling it, did it rub off on your hands? She goes, yeah, of course, I'm handling it. And he goes, and what did you do when you noticed it was rubbing off on your hands a little bit? She said, I put it on. It smells nice. Right? What are you supposed to do? Right? And he says, so you benefited from it. It's the public fund. I'm the Amir. I'm supposed to be in charge. I'm supposed to lead by example. And my wife is sitting here rubbing musk on herself. From the public fund. Not intentionally, not deliberately. But do you see how careful they were, how cautious they were? This is all built into this theme of وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. This is how you have to kind of look at your life. Nobody said it was easy. But it's just the way that it works. It's just the way that it is. And so the next point that I wanted to touch upon is now, how did the Prophet ﷺ actually realize this within his life, this instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So in regards to that, there are very famous narrations. There are actually 2 events from the early mission of the Prophet ﷺ that demonstrate to us exactly how he went about this. The first one is narrated by Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he did was, he sent an invitation out to 40 of the major leaders. Rubiya, أنه جمع بني عبد المطلب وهم يومئذ 40 رجلا. He first started with the elders of his own immediate family. Banu Abdul Muttalib, that's his grandfather's name. So immediate family, uncles and cousins and things like that. The responsible people of his own immediate family. He gathered them together. When gathering them together, he told Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu that I want you to, get this, go talk to that person, let's get some food prepared, let's get some, good water, let's get some milk, let's prepare a whole feast, like a whole meal. He invited everyone together, served the meal, everyone ate, and then the Prophet ﷺ wanted to start talking to them. But Abu Lahab sensing, because by now, they had started to kind of talk and hear about, there seems to be something going on with him. So him sensing that he might try to talk to us about this, Abu Lahab's like, well, okay, thanks for the food, everybody's got to go, all right, bye. And he just kind of dispersed the gathering. And so everybody left. The Prophet ﷺ got another little gathering together, invited them all, got food together, maybe a few days later or something like that. Got everyone together. Everyone got together once again. And again, he served them food. And again, before he could address them and speak to them, Abu Lahab dispersed the gathering. Dismissed everyone. Then that happened the third time. The third time, the Prophet ﷺ, this time, even though the etiquette was feed them first and then talk to them, the Prophet ﷺ said, no, I'm going to talk to them first. Because Abu Lahab's going to keep playing this game with me. So the Prophet ﷺ addressed them. And narration mentions that he said to them, Ya Bani Abdul Muttalib, لو أخبرتكم أن يسفح هذا الجبل خيلا أكنتم مصدقية. That if I told you that there was an imminent attack on Makkah, would you believe me? قالوا نعم فإني نذير لكم بين يدي عذاب شديد. He said that I'm warning you that there's a punishment from God, a very severe punishment from God, and I'm here to warn you about it. Another narration, he said, Ya Bani Abdul Muttalib, Ya Bani Hashim, Ya Bani Abdi Munaf. That's the immediate family. افتدوا أنفسكم من النار فإني لا أغني عنكم من الله شيئا. He said that you need to save your souls from the fire of hell because I will not be able to protect you. I can't protect you if you don't help yourself. And when he says this, then Abu Lahab basically gets up and he says, you're threatening us, and who do you think you are, and have you lost your mind? And he goes off. And that basically ends up really spoiling the gathering. And Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu stands up and he tells him, you don't talk to him that way. And then Abu Lahab tells Abu Talib, do you see how do you see how your son speaks to me? To his uncle? And it just all goes south really quickly. One of the cousins of the Prophet ﷺ, Al-Harith, he actually, as everyone's leaving, he comes to the Prophet ﷺ and he threatens him. He would actually become Muslim later on, and when he becomes Muslim, he would apologize to the Prophet ﷺ. But he threatens the Prophet ﷺ at that day, and the situation goes really badly. Then there is a second moment. The second moment is when the Prophet ﷺ, this is a very famous narration that's found in the Sahih Imam Bukhari and in the majority of the Sirah books, that the Prophet ﷺ actually now, instead of just the people of Banu Abdul Muttalib, the Prophet ﷺ gathers together a majority of the Quraysh. Majority of the Quraysh. He gathers them together. He climbs up onto the mountain of Safa, where we began the sa'i from. He climbs up onto the mountain, and then from there the Prophet ﷺ, he addresses everyone, he addresses the crowd. And the Prophet ﷺ specifically to acknowledge each of the major families that are present there on that particular day, to kind of let them know, the Prophet ﷺ acknowledges them and addresses them. فَجَعَلَ يُنَادِي يَا بَنِي فِهِرْ يَا بَنِي عَدِي لِبُطُونِ قُرَيْشْ حَتَّى اجْتَمَعُوا. The Prophet ﷺ addresses each and every single family of the Quraysh. They all gather together. Everyone starts listening. The Prophet ﷺ makes a similar statement as he had made to the elders of his own family. He says, أَرَأَيْتُكُمْ لَوْ أَخْبَرْتُكُمْ أَنَّ خَيْلًا بِالْوَادِي تُرِيدُ أَن تُغِيرَ عَلَيْكُمْ أَكُنْتُمْ مُصَدِّقِيَّ. If I told you that there is an army outside of Mecca that is about to attack Mecca, would you believe me? قَالُوا نَعَمْ مَا جَرَّبْنَا عَلَيْكَ إِلَّا صِدْقًا. They said, of course, we've only known you to tell the truth. قَالَ فَإِنِّي نَذِيرٌ لَكُمْ بَيْنَ يَدَيْ عَذَابٍ شَدِيدٍ. He says again, same message. He says that I'm here to warn you about a very terrible punishment that could befall you. فَقَالَ أَبُو لَهَبٍ. And that's when once again Abu Lahab speaks up and he says, تَبًّا لَكَ تَبًّا لَكَ سَائِرَ الْيَوْمِ. He curses him. Literally, it kind of roughly translates to, may your hands be broken. But it's basically like cursing someone. It's cursing someone. And he says, may you be cursed. أَلِهَذَا جَمَعْتَنَا. Is this why you gathered us together? Are you wasting our time with this? فَنَزَلَتْ. And that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the surah of the Quran, تَبَّتْ يَدَا أَبِي لَهَبٍ وَتَبَّ. Where God said he's actually damned and he's ruined. He dare curses the Prophet ﷺ. He's ruined. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds on his behalf. But this is that moment when the Prophet ﷺ went, as difficult as it was, as hard as it was. This is that moment where he went before the family, he gathered everyone together, the people closest to him, tribes people, and he presented the message to them. And we know how it went. There were many people close to the Prophet ﷺ who accepted the message, but we also saw that he faced and he met a lot of opposition. But that did not deter the Prophet ﷺ from the mission that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had entrusted him with. Now that's the first thing. In the next ayah, ayah number 215, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَاخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِمَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Literally translated, lower your wing of parentheses of mercy for those who follow you from amongst the believers. Now, there's two things that need to be talked about. Two things that we need to figure out. First of all, what does that mean, lower your wing, and then parentheses of mercy, like lower your wing, or lower your wing of mercy? What does that mean? That's an expression in the Arabic language. And this was, again, a very visual language. Very visual language. So what they saw, where they derived this idiom, this expression from, was when they saw that a bird, when it basically came, when it came to the nest, and the offspring, the babies, the chicks, when they would be there, what the bird basically would do, what the mother would do, is that she lowers her wings, and covers and lowers them over the offspring. And it's a form of protection, it's a form of providing warmth and love and protection. And it's merciful. It's mercy. It's a mercy that a mother displays to her baby. And that's where they got this expression from. So being humble and being loving and being caring and being warm was described as lower your wing. Lower your wing. And that's where it was derived from. So this is an expression. So it means be humble, be loving, be warm, be kind, be soft, be generous. Right? With who? لِمَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. For those who follow you from amongst the believers. Now if you haven't picked up on it already, Imam Razi rahimahullah ta'ala, he asks a question here. Very fascinating. He says that those who follow you from amongst the believers, those who follow the Prophet, aren't they already believers? Doesn't that seem, and shouldn't believers be following the Prophet? So is this a level of redundancy? Those who follow you from amongst the believers? But those who follow you are believers, and believers should be following you. So why those who follow you from amongst the believers? Well, the answer, if you can't already guess it, if you will, the answer is that the Prophet ﷺ is being given a very specific instruction. He's being instructed by Allah to be very gentle, to be very kind. To be very gentle, to be very kind. And while ideally, So there's two things I need to explain. Number one, remember we talked about this before. فَإِنِّي أَحْكُمْ عَلَى الظَّاهِرِ نَحْنُ نَحْكُمْ بِالظَّوَاهِرِ وَاللَّهُ يَتَوَلَّى السَّرَائِرِ. Right? We deal with the apparent external reality of things. God knows the internal reality of things. Okay? So, were there people in Medina who talked like Muslims, acted like Muslims, came and prayed with the Muslims, but were really trying to undermine the Muslims the whole time? Were there people like that? Of course, we talked about them, the hypocrites, the munafiqun. That was a huge problem. But the issue was that we can only go off of what we see on the outside. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, number one, is saying that someone might outwardly be acting like a believer. You have to take them at face value. They are believers. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, be very gentle and be very soft with those in the community who follow you. What that means is if they become rebellious, if they become disobedient, then as in any case of tarbiyah, like think about a parent, right? If a parent should be very kind and soft and generous. But if a parent never disciplines the child, if a parent never corrects the child, if a parent never says no to the child, is that good or bad for the child? He's like, that's what my dad said to say. All right? All right? So, but he's correct. He's correct. It is bad for the child. All right? It is bad for the child. You know, that's how you spoil a child. So there has to be some type of, there have to be some rules, some discipline, some consequences, something. There has to be something. So this is the same role of the Prophet ﷺ as a murabbi, as the one providing the spiritual tarbiyah, the nurturing of the ummah, that you might have to provide consequences. We see that in Surah At-Tawbah. وَعَلَى الثَّلَاثَةِ الَّذِينَ خُلِّفُوا. There were 3 sincere Muslims who stayed back from the Battle of Tabuk even though they did not have a valid excuse. Were there consequences for them? Yes, they were. There were consequences. So there have to be some type of consequences, but this is more so talking about that when they comply, when they follow your instructions, that be very gentle and be very soft with them. And even in this is a profound lesson about leadership. Because once again, the weakness, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. The human being has some very bad tendencies. And one of the bad tendencies of the human being is that when you're in a position of responsibility, if you have someone that is difficult, if you have a subordinate that is very difficult, you can try to avoid that difficult situation and consequence, the confrontation, and you just try to maybe avoid any discomfort. So you don't actually deal with that problem. And on the other hand, when you have a subordinate that is very compliant, then that's the one that is easier to boss around. That's the one that's easier to bully. That's the one that's easier to pick on. Because he does whatever I say. He does whatever I say. So why not? Right? And that's a huge problem. And that shows weakness. And the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran was told the opposite. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. Be gentle, be soft with them. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Because if they're compliant, they follow you, they're obedient, and if you would have been harsh and difficult with them, لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ, at the first sign of trouble they would have dispersed. But they stick to you because of how you treat them and how you take care of them. And so وَقْفِدْ جَنَاحَكَ لِمَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. This is something very, very important to take into consideration. فَإِنْ عَصَوْكَ. But if they disobey you, now what do you do with the ones that are disobedient? What do you do about the ones that are not compliant? What do you do with the ones who don't listen to you? فَإِنْ عَصَوْكَ. If they disobey you, فَقُلْ. Then say, إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. Even there's wisdom. Because on the flip side, there's another type of personality that is so vengeful. Another weakness of the human being is to be very vengeful. Okay? To be very spiteful. And so what ends up happening is that if you comply, if I'm in charge, if you comply, okay, fine, I'll be good to you. But if you do not comply, then I will eradicate you. Right? There's that as well. And that's also equally as problematic. Because even the Prophet ﷺ is being told not to be like that. No. We have to embody mercy. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So what do you do when they disobey you? فَقُلْ, say, إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. I do not take responsibility for your actions. I told you to do A, B, and C. You went and did X, Y, and Z. I cannot take responsibility for this. There's a very powerful moment from the life of the Prophet ﷺ where when they came for the conquest of Mecca, there was a tribe outside of Mecca, and there were some news of maybe some troublemakers stirring up some trouble over there and causing some problems from over there. The Prophet ﷺ sent Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu over there and told him, go and assess the situation. Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu went there, and they were Bedouin people. Some of them had actually accepted Islam. And he kind of rounded everyone up. And because they had become Muslim, some of them started getting a little, they're Bedouins as well, so they're a little rough around the edges, and they started getting kind of they started kind of freaking out a little bit. They started getting a bit agitated. Why are we being rounded up? Why are we being rounded up? And then they tried to explain to them that we're ready to accept Islam, we're on board with y'all. But not knowing the proper nomenclature, the proper verbiage, aslamna, we become Muslim, we'll become Muslim. They started saying sabatna. We leave our old religion, Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu, not understanding what they were saying. Back in the old days of Mecca, they used to taunt the Prophet ﷺ by saying sabata. You left the religion of your forefathers. So when they were saying sabatna, Khalid almost thought for a moment that they were taunting the Muslims. And one thing started getting out of hand. Somebody shoved somebody pushed somebody else, and before you knew it, swords came out, and a bunch of those people that had been rounded up were killed. Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu goes back to the Prophet ﷺ. They give him the report of what happened, and the Prophet ﷺ raised his hand saying, Allahumma inni bari'un min Khalid wa sun'ihi. He said, oh Allah, I cannot take responsibility for what Khalid did. I told you to go assess the situation and not start rounding. Why'd you start rounding people up? He's like, I just wanted to secure the area. He goes, you decided you wanted to secure the area. I didn't tell you to do that. But instead of, again, punishing and being vengeful and angry and spiteful, he just said, oh Allah, I can't take responsibility for this. But then subhanAllah, just to complete the story, what did the Prophet ﷺ do? The Prophet ﷺ took a bunch of funds, and he sent Ali bin Abi Talib out there and to go and find out how many people were accidentally killed in that situation, that confusion. The families, reach out to the families, find out who was killed, how many people were killed, and basically pay them the reparations that were made at that time, the diya. Pay the reparations at that time. Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu, something fascinating. He paid every single person. And there were still some funds left over from what the Prophet ﷺ gave him. And he was like, what should I do with these funds? So what he did was he just equally distributed out amongst all the families in that area, for just the trouble that they had gone through. He goes back to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, I paid all the families their reparations, the diya. And then there was money left over, so I just gifted it to all the families in the tribe. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ahsanta. That's the right decision. فَإِنْ عَصَوْكَ فَقُلْ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. I can't take responsibility. If they disobey you, you're telling them what to do, and then they go otherwise, you tell them, I can't take responsibility for this. We'll go ahead and stop and conclude here at ayah number 216, inshallah. and we'll proceed forward from here in the following session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to practice everything that's been said and heard. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.